Today on the Beta Files, we're going to look at the Dark Horse Unity Duo project. I'm going to say that again. Dark Horse Unity Duo project. What is it? What they're planning to do? And if you want to get involved, how you can get involved. This is not, I'm not endorsing it. I'm not condoning it. I'm not condemning it. I'm not saying that it's bad. We're just going to look at it because I don't think it's getting enough steam, and it actually has a pretty interesting premise. So we're going to look at it, see what it's all about, and you can just go from there. Today on the Beta Files. So hang on to your diapers, babies. I'm the barber. This is the Beta Files. All right, guys. So today, what we're going to talk about, like I said in the teaser, is just basically what this thing is. And if you haven't heard about it, it is. And I'm going to show you a couple clips, one from Joe Rogan and one from The Hill, where Bret Weinstein actually lays this thing out. And it's actually a political project that I have kind of asked the question before: why can't we find someone like this to run instead of the traditional Democratic or Republican candidates? And this is not, before we go any further, this is not like a libertarian movement or a Green Party movement or the Ross Perot thing from the early 90s. Excuse me. This is actually something completely and entirely different. And it's mainly coming from one of the biggest players in the intellectual dark web movement that came out a couple years ago. So whatever your take on the IDW is, I hope you aren't shutting this video off now. I hope you hang in there for just a minute just to hear what he's proposing and what they want to do. They are not wanting to completely flip the system. This is not a revolutionary call. What it is a third option or another option to the binary system that we have. This is not to be confused with the Democratic Unity Project that earlier this morning I saw a article about Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders coming together and trying to lay out a common, I guess you would say, a common Democratic platform that addressed a lot of the progressives issues, but at the same time kind of kept it more towards the middle, or is trying to keep it more towards the middle. This is completely different from that. There are several names that they've kind of given it, and I'll show you the website later. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast, I'll describe the website. I'll also have a link to the website in both the podcast description. Well, no, I can't do that. Not in the podcast description, but it will be in the YouTube description. And I'll also have a link to it if you go to thebetafiles.com in the podcast window at the very top of our page. When you land on our homepage, I'll have a link to their website as well. Again, I'm not condoning this. I'm not saying that this is the right answer. I'm not saying that this is, and I'm not, pitching it. But I am going to talk about it because I think we need to know what all is out there. We can't just let MSNBC and Fox News decide our fate. Because here's the thing, the major networks are going to have a field day with this thing. He did mention it on Tucker Carlson. If you can find that clip, it's kind of funny the way Tucker reacts because he's kind of speechless at the end because he didn't know it was coming. And Mr. Weinstein kind of caught him off guard, which is very funny to see that happen to Tucker. But I'm sure if this thing starts to gain steam, Fox News and CNN and MSNBC are just going to shoot all kinds of holes through it. So I wanted to do this video to kind of get in front of that so that you know what they're talking about. Even if you don't agree with it or you decide, you know what, it's not even worth it. You still have a little bit of ammunition going into this before they start just destroying this in the mainstream media. They haven't gotten a hold of it yet because if you've been paying attention to the news this week, another cancel culture moment with that letter from Harper's happened. So, but we'll go ahead and start with showing you the clip from Joe Rogan where Weinstein initially pitched it. And in this clip, he's talking to Rogan about it, and he kind of it sounds like he's brainstorming, and this was early on when they were starting to put things together a little bit. But let's do the whole clip, and then I'll show you a clip from The Hill, which was just last week, where it's a little more structured, and they've actually got a website. And then, like I said, I'll show you the website. And for those of you who are listening, I'll describe the website when we go there. But here's the original clip from Joe Rogan when Weinstein kind of drops this for the first time. All right, so enjoy.
Here's the plan. This plan needs a better name, but the working title is the Dark Horse Duo Plan. And the plan looks like this. We draft two individuals. We find two people. One of them is center left and one of them is center right. And these people have to have certain characteristics, a minimum set. They have to be patriotic, they have to be courageous, and they have to be highly capable, right? But that's it.
Okay.
Center left and a center right. And we pair them together. And we draft them with the following plan, that they will govern as a team. That is to say, every important decision will be discussed, and they will decide what to do as a team. And only in cases where they cannot reach agreement or whenever something has to be decided on a very short time scale, like a military decision, does the person who inhabits the role of the president govern alone. Okay? We draft these folks, and then 4 years down the road, they switch. And the one who had run for president now runs for the vice presidential spot, and the one who was vice president now runs for president. And they continue this way until one of two things happens. Either we vote someone else in, or one of them has inhabited the office of president twice and is no longer eligible, and then that person has to be replaced. So we have a patriotic team governing together from center left and center right.
But when you say drafted, that's the problem. Like, someone has to be motivated to ruin their fucking lives to try to run this country, because that's what happens to everybody that does it.
I agree. But then that's an obstacle. You're spelling out an obstacle that I would argue is solvable, that we know these people.
Who?
Okay, so
okay,
let's just say that's the plan so far, and we can talk about what problems it solves as much as you want.
I feel like I should have a drink and listen to this.
You're welcome to have a drink. It's probably a good idea.
Kind of kidding, but go ahead.
Okay, so here's my proposal. So the plan could be right, and my proposal for who we draft could be wrong, and I'm happy to see other people swapped in.
Okay.
But my proposal would be Admiral William McRaven on the right. You know who that is?
No, I don't.
Okay, he is a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL. He was until 2018 the Chancellor of the University of Texas. He is a very cogent center-right Republican. He was the lead on the bin Laden raid, and he is, I think, universally respected by people who know him. I've never heard anybody say negative things about him. On the center left...
Let me see this gentleman. I'm going to look at his face.
Yeah, you're going to know. There he is.
Yeah, I have seen that guy before.
Yeah.
I like it. Looks like a president to me.
Yeah, he looks like a president to me, too. You know who else looks like a president to me?
Who?
Andrew Yang.
I'm down with that.
Okay. So,
I like what you're saying now.
Good. So here's my point.
Those two guys together.
Those two. Is that camera on?
Yes.
Admiral, your country needs you. It really does. Never more than now. And I know that the job of president is a sucky one. I'm sure the job of vice president's even worse. But please consider this plan because the republic is in jeopardy. Now, we already know that Andrew Yang is up for the job because he ran for office.
Yes.
And, faced appallingly stupid obstacles that, in my opinion, may be the reason that he's not the nominee. So here we got two people. One of them, I think, will do so out of duty. The other is crazy enough to want the job in the first place. And what are they? Well, they're both patriots, they're both courageous, and they're both highly capable.
So there you go. So there's the video itself, and when he first announced it on Joe Rogan. Now, since then, he and his wife have done a couple podcasts on it where they've kind of addressed a lot of the concerns. A couple of those that I'm going to talk about here once we get through the clips and the website. And some of the concerns that he actually talks to Sagar and Jetty on the Hill about, which I'm going to play you a clip from that as well, and that was, again, about a week ago. But when the podcast aired with Joe Rogan, and I heard him talk about that, I was like, that's actually pretty interesting because that's something along the lines that I've been talking about for a few years privately with my friends. Like, it would be great if we could find somebody like that because the only way that we're going to get away from this continuous pendulum swing that we've gotten into since the Reagan administration, maybe. And it started there, but then it just, with each swing of the pendulum, it just gets further and further into the extremes, to where we have Donald Trump. So of course the immediate backlash is going to be, and we're looking at Biden and everybody's touting how moderate he is, but if you look at the people who are backing him, they are not moderate. And they have ties to heavy left, right? So we're going to see the pendulum swing that way if things work out the way the Democrats are wanting. And I'm not saying that's, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I'm not doing the Tucker Carlson thing, or I'm saying, they're going to come and take your babies and your jobs. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we're going to continue in this era, or this cycle of watching things just swing dramatically back and forth. And what this offers is a chance to steady the pendulum so that we can get back to being decent to ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that, the 1960s, 70s, and 80s were anything special. But we were cordial for the most part during those periods, during those decades. You didn't have just there's so much hatred out there right now. And it's just, it breaks my heart, and it angers me. I was talking to Jay, I went, as you'll see when we do the Optic Poet next week on Monday, I was telling Jay off camera about just how frustrated I am right now. How frustrated I am at the right, how frustrated I am at the liberal left, how frustrated I am over these cancel culture moves that we're seeing all across the board. And it's getting dangerous out there. And I talked to Jay about the fact that I'm worried. I'm worried because I'm one of those people that in my position at my job, I don't have enough power to guard against a cancel culture moment. And I'm scared. And these liberals who say there's no such thing as that and turn around and cancel the co-founder of Vox. yeah, he's probably going to make it through. He's going to get hurt a little bit, but then he'll make it through and reestablish himself as one of the most irritating liberal voices out there. But I don't have that kind of power. And a lot of the people that I work with, we don't have that kind of power. We're low on the totem pole when it comes to social power in this moment of culture reckoning. And it's not to say that I am any kind of racist bigot against transgender, gay, blacks, or anything like that, because I'm not. But saying the wrong thing can be taken out of context, and I'm done. And my problem, one of my biggest problems throughout my life, is that I grew up in a very rural, conservative area where you speak your mind a lot. And you speak it freely. And people with my personality who are raised the way that I was raised, we're having to really step back. And one of the things that George Orwell really pushed back against and really warned us about was not a state-sanctioned censorship, right? But personal censorship, because the culture itself becomes so toxic that you're afraid to say anything. And then when that happens, the dominant power takes over. And we have seen it so many times through history. So many times. And it's scary. And what this particular plan that Weinstein is introducing, although it seems, and I'm going to talk about this after I show the next couple clips, it seems like it's not feasible, not because it's weak or anything like that. It's not feasible because we are so divided right now, and we are so entrenched on our sides. Well, the elites are so entrenched on their sides that they're going to team up and just make sure that this doesn't happen because it's a threat. But like I said, what I wanted to do was just let you see what he's talking about and let you see the idea, because good ideas keep going if people have knowledge of those ideas. Good ideas die when you don't have knowledge of those ideas. And this is not a democracy dies in darkness kind of deal. This is just a plain fact. In order for good ideas to spread, people have to know what they are. Whether they agree with them or not, good ideas have to be spread. And so there you go. So here's the next clip I wanted to show you. This is from The Hill, where he talks to Sagar, and he addresses a couple of the concerns that I had when I first heard about this, when I saw the Rogan thing. Because after the Rogan thing, I thought about this for a few days. I'm like, it sounds good, but there's something wrong. There's what's the linchpin, right? So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But here is the other clip, like I said, with Sagar from The Hill, as he talks to Mr. Weinstein. Oh, I actually have to cut it, don't I?
Yeah, I mean, well, you have two candidates in mind. I think that's one thing we should talk a little bit about, which is what really has caused some of the big discussion. If we could talk about who those two candidates are. You said Andrew Yang and General McRaven. Why those two candidates, do you think, are the people who could unite this kind of center-left and center-right ideology and govern the country well?
Well, those two candidates are ideal in the sense that they are both above politics. Andrew Yang has obviously played a good political game, but his motivation is clearly honorable, and he is capable of motivating people. So he'd be a perfect candidate from the center-left. And Admiral McRaven is obviously a deeply committed patriot who fears little and knows how to get things done, is widely respected on the right and amongst people on the left who know him also. So both of these gentlemen would be excellent candidates to rule or to govern as a team, and they're both reasonable, patriotic, capable men.
I mean, I guess all of the questions boil down to the realistic nature of all of this, right? But I think that one of the things that you're getting to is that we often get trapped. This is one of the major criticisms of the two-party system is because they lock things in, is that, the pervasive corruption and that they give Americans a binary choice. Bret, why are you choosing to just reject that framework outright and say, no, we have a different one?
Well, first of all, this is the game every single election cycle. We are told now is not the time to try to do something different, because if you do something different, you will elect the greater evil. And that trap keeps us from ever accomplishing anything. It leaves the duopoly in power and these dueling influence peddling rackets in a position to control policy. So it's been decades since public policy actually served the public. It's been serving special interests, and at some point you have to call a halt. Now, in this election cycle, we also face the fact that the parties have transparently failed to deliver us anybody capable of the leadership necessary to address the crises that we face. So in some sense, the parties have left us no choice but to go now. So what we have done with this plan is we have solved the problems that usually dog people who advance heterodox ideas about how to address the corruption crisis. And I must tell you, we've gotten our first round of numbers back, and the numbers say that the design of the plan is working perfectly, in the sense that it does not threaten to spoil the election for several different reasons. Among them, that the people we are drawing are dead even between former Biden supporters and former Trump supporters. So it does not upset that balance at all. What's more, we're picking up a quarter of our volunteers are people who weren't planning to vote at all in this election. So in many ways, this is functioning exactly as we had hoped. It's the best case scenario. Now, your viewers should...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, let's break some of these numbers down. Let's talk about how you got them and what they mean and some of the key metrics.
Well, let's put it this way. It's very difficult for a small organization to run a national poll. So we're not talking about national poll numbers. What we're talking about are numbers derived from people who signed up to volunteer with us. So what that does is it corrects for the problems that would happen if we ran a small poll and didn't get an appropriate sample. So among people who are motivated enough to support this idea, they are drawn evenly from both parties. If they were going to vote for one of the major party candidates, they are drawn equally from Biden and Trump, with a slight increase in the number coming from Trump. So anyway, the short answer is amongst people who are motivated, this is not upsetting the balance. But the primary protection from spoiling is that built into the plan, if as the election approaches, this ticket is not viable, that is to say it cannot win, we, by agreement, will pull the plug on it so that it does not have the potential to spoil the election.
Mm-hmm. Well, what progress have you made so far in actually getting these candidates on board with the plan that you're running on?
Well, we have certainly had conversations, and I must say the off-the-record conversations that we are having show spectacular interest in this plan. There's a lot of support based on the fact that the plan is innovative and does take care of the issues that would usually prevent such a plan from being viable. People are, of course, cautious at this early stage to sign on because nobody wants to be, back-footed if the plan turns out to be tilting at windmills. So what we really need is a groundswell of support, at which point people will be willing to publicly tell us what we are hearing privately.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, Bret. I mean, well, I guess the last part I want to get into is about the ideology of the plan itself, because I've kind of rejected center-right and center-left, because the way I look at it is that the center-left and the center-right very much agree on one thing, and that's continuing the grift and the corruption that's going on. So whenever you say center-left and you say center-right, what do you mean by that? Because it seems to me that your politics are very much animated by the same as mine, in that we want to get rid of this corruption. We want to escape what's going here, and that's why we embrace what is viewed as radicals by the center, whereas you're also using the language of centrism. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I certainly do not mean centrism in the standard way. In fact, I consider myself a radical. Now, I don't believe the same things that most of modern radical America believes, but I do believe we need radical change in order to save the republic. I think we're in much graver danger than I think most people recognize. For one thing, in this election cycle, we have seen what has unfolded on the left, but the right has not yet played its cards. And I believe that the combination of those two things means that over the next year we are in grave danger. But the point is this. It doesn't really matter where you are on the political spectrum. In order to save the republic, we have to meet in the middle. We have to agree on the basics, the fundamental values that make the nation capable of greatness. So meeting in the middle is the natural thing to do. And what I would expect from an administration that was composed in this way, I would expect a grouping of positions that is not known as a slate to anyone. That is to say, presidents do not rule by their own encyclopedic knowledge of how the world functions. They consult people. And if you take two people who are both patriots, that is to say, they are not beholden to some special interest, they are actually governing in the interest of the nation, and you have them discussing these issues with the relevant experts, you're going to find that they end up with some conservative positions, some liberal positions, and it will be a very new set of policy proposals that the American public has yet to encounter.
Okay, so that was Weinstein on the Hill with Saagar, just breaking down and addressing some of the concerns that people are naturally going to have from the start. Now, so far, they have not released any policy ideas because I think they're still trying to just get the players together and get them on board. I haven't heard much as far as what's going to happen with, or as far as an update or anything like that. But I'm sure if you go in and you sign up for their newsletter, they will update you on what's going on, that kind of thing. We're going to come back to the concerns here in just a minute when I get to the back end of this. But I do want to go ahead and talk about the website that they have. So. And like I said, I'm going to have a link to it on YouTube and on the BetaFiles blog. Unfortunately, I can't do it with the blog, with the podcast stuff, so you'll have to go to the blog site, www.thebetafiles.com, to get the link to their site, or just go straight to their site, and I'll give you the web address here in a minute when I pull it up because I can't remember it off the top of my head. But I also have it in the description for the YouTube site for this particular podcast. So this is what their website looks like. If you're listening to the podcast, I'll just go ahead and describe it to you. When you the website is called articlesofunity.com. If you type in articlesofunity.org, it will take you to this website as well. So they've got 2 domains so far, and I'm sure they probably got .net too. But anyway, you land on the homepage, and at the very top they've got a picture of American flag in a wonderful, it looks like a Midwestern picturesque skyscape, I guess you could say, or sky. I can't talk. Landscape. And then you've got underneath that, you got home, about, and volunteer. And if you click on the volunteer thing, it'll take you to where you can volunteer and tell them what you'd be willing to do. About, they have a FAQ portion so far, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. And then right underneath that is a big blue banner that says 2020, and then hashtag Unity 2020 e pluribus unum, and then a place where you can put your email address and your zip code for a newsletter. And then they have the entire 14-minute interview that Weinstein did on Rising with Crystal and Saagar, so you can click on that and watch that right from their website. And then over to the right of the clip, they have a quote from Benjamin Franklin, the quote that we keep hearing Nancy Pelosi say over and over to the point where it's just redundant. But the quote from Benjamin Franklin, "A republic if you can keep it." And then underneath it, they say, we are calling upon every citizen to recapture the people's house and restore hope for our future, our children's future, and for generations yet to come. So they are trying to focus on the needs of the larger group, not necessarily the needs of the political elite. Underneath that, they have another block, and it says, our country needs us, and they've got the preamble of the Constitution. And then right beside that, they have a block. It's called the Hidden Tribes of America, and they basically show what percentage each different political column represents in America. And they've got the progressive activists, the traditional liberals, the passive liberals, the politically disengaged, the moderates, the traditional conservatives, and the devoted conservatives. And apparently I only represent 15% of the population as a moderate. It says engaged, civic-minded, middle of the road, pessimistic, and Protestant. I think that's interesting. Why they noted Protestant. Anyway, all right. But they have with each one of those, they have just like tag words, I guess you'd say, or keywords that kind of describe each column. And then they've got the facts, and they have 3 up at the top, and then a little button that says see all facts. And then and the first fact is, but won't it be a spoiler? And the answer is no. The Unity ticket is designed to avoid that pitfall in 2 different ways. And then, of course, to learn more. If you click on the learn more, it tells you, first, by bridging the center left and center right, the Unity ticket disempowers both major parties rather than empowering one or the other. And, of course, that is theoretical, obviously. Second, the plan includes a fail-safe. If at a certain chosen point prior to the general election, the Unity ticket has no viable path to the White House, the candidacy will be suspended. Now, that I actually like. Not only is it possible for a Unity ticket to win, but the Republic may well depend upon it, and it's right underneath that. But I like this idea that they recognize that if they get close to election day and they realize they just don't have the numbers, they'll call it quits. They'll pull the plug. And I think because the nature of this, I don't think they're going to wait till the last second. And then they have the other big one was time. Are you sure that we have time? So under the section for time, either one would be the oldest person ever sworn in as president, and persistent concerns about declining health and cognition are certainly only to grow. Historically, the major parties have ensured that alternative efforts were doomed to fail. In 2020, however, both parties have delivered presidential candidates who are broadly distrusted and show no capacity to rise above partisan politics. The need for leadership has never been greater, yet the parties have never offered less. President Trump certainly has loyal supporters, but outside of that circle, he is widely distrusted, even within his own party. His insistence on politicizing every issue is a terrible match for this dangerous moment. Outside the ranks of DNC loyalists, it is difficult to find anyone enthusiastic about Joe Biden's candidacy. The ground is fertile for anything that captures the public imagination and restores confidence in our capacity as a nation. So what they're saying about the time factor, the fact that we're running out of time if we're going to do this, what they're saying is that these 2 particular candidates, and I can agree with this, honestly, these 2 candidates are 2 of the weakest choices I think we've ever seen in the history of this nation. And if we have seen it, it's been so long since we've seen such weak choices between these 2. I mean, this is just, it's sad. And then, of course, they talk about the groundswell, what they need from you. So that's what they've got so far, and then they've got more highlights from Bret Weinstein on Tucker Carlson, and of course the Rogan podcast they've got up here, and then of course they've got the podcast with he and his wife Heather, where they talk about it, and then join the movement, get email updates about the campaign, and again another same thing as what you have at the top. And one of the other things that he said during the Sagar interview when he was on the Hills Rising, he noted that a lot of the Yang supporters have already, with or without Yang, have already pledged allegiance to this, and they're ready to go with this. And this is like the quote unquote Yang gang, the people that were on the inside with Yang, and they've already said they're all about this, even if Yang doesn't do it. So he's got a campaign group, or a group from a campaign that is recent, that was just in the fray. Whether they did a good job or not, that's up for the press to figure out. But of course the press will tell you they did a horrible job, because again, they're a threat, right? But I think they did a pretty good job, because Yang came out of nowhere and was gaining steam and gaining momentum there for a hot second, and then of course the machine reared its ugly head and Biden got the nomination, or Biden was announced as the presumed candidate. He is. Keep this. We need to keep one thing in mind above all this. He hasn't gotten the nomination yet. They haven't had the convention yet. So just keep that in mind. It could happen. An upset could happen. But it's not his yet. It's a foregone conclusion, but technically speaking, it's not his yet. So the obvious problems are, of course, is there enough time to do this? I think in the age that we live in, if this had happened in the mid 80s, no, right? Mid 90s, no. Now, yeah. I think there's time still to get something like this going. Will it? I don't think it will. I don't think it's going to get enough steam. I like the idea. I really like the idea. I don't know if you can actually do this or not. I don't know if you're going to get enough of Americans to get on board with this. You're going to have a very, very strong message if you're going to get this to actually happen. And right now, and I'm not saying that now is not the time. Now is the perfect time to pull something like this, to do something like this, to try this. This is a wonderfully great time to do this, because there's so much distrust from both ends. And if the culture war continues to escalate, and the culture war I'm talking about is not the one that Tucker Carlson and Trump are screaming about. I'm talking about this cancel culture movement that we're in the middle of, where the progressives are just having a field day and nobody is checking them. And when they do attempt to check them, because if you actually read the letter from Harper's the other day, it's not threatening at all. It's pretty much just straight up, if we're going to have a democracy in this country, we have to respect the First Amendment. Respecting the First Amendment does not mean that you get to speak and I don't. That's not what that means. The First Amendment means that you have to entertain all the ideas, no matter how radical they may be. The worst thing in the world is having citizens who feel like they have been shut out. That is how Trump got elected. He played that card, and he played it really well. And that's why he's screaming culture war right now. But the culture war he's talking about doesn't exist. The culture war that's actually happening is one from the progressive Democrats, where they are, well, I wouldn't even say they're progressive Democrats. It's just the ultra-liberal progressives in this country are setting up this very tight regime, and they need to be reeled in the way we reeled in the Tea Party. And I was actually, Jay and I were talking about this the other day, and you'll go on, you'll hear someone like Tim Pool or Steven Crowder talking about how they're gonna come, and the end of civilization as we know it is going to be at the hands of the Democratic Party. Blah 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 blah. We heard the same thing in 2000 when GW was running for president the first time. If he gets elected, and then in 2004 we heard it again. If he gets reelected, it's over. The world is going to come to an end. And then we heard the same thing from the conservatives. If in 2008, if Obama is elected, it's the end of the world. And again in 2012, it's the end of the world. And then we heard it in 2016. If Trump gets elected, it's the end of the world. It's the thing about it is that most of the time it's the backdoor deals in Congress that shape how the country moves at a specific historical moment. It's rare that the president has this sweeping ability to completely destroy the Union. It's typically Congress is the one that hurts us as a populace. And they pass with the laws that they pass and the way that they pass them and the loopholes they put into it. I mean, just look at the tax code. You know, we always say it's the Bush tax cut or the Trump tax cut or whatever. You know, you always name it after the president because he offers a tax code, shift in the policy. The bulk of the tax code, though, is written by the Congress, and the Congress screws the American people every time they write that freaking tax code. It's just a fact. So when you look at this project, that leads to the other thing about this project that bothers me about this. Okay, we get them in there. Then what? What policies are we going to be able to get through Congress? Are they going to be able to actually get Congress to work? Or is Congress going to spend the entire, as a united effort between the Democrats and the Republicans, are they going to try and just undercut the administration to the point where the administration is defeated, both internally and externally? That's a real possibility. Because if you have we've never had an independent president working with Democrats and Republicans in Congress. Never. So what happens when you take away one of the key power structures from the two parties, but they're still in Congress? You still have the two parties in Congress, and they're dominating Congress. What happens then? Is anything going to get done? That's one of the other big worries that I have, and I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of skepticism from very intelligent, very smart people, who understand that even if you get there. Now, you could look at it as, okay, so here recently the Democrats have had a few very progressive wins in different areas they weren't expecting. A couple of Republicans came out of nowhere that had no ties to Trump and McConnell and have won. So we're starting to see the public is, just in the primaries, is starting to move away from the establishment and what the establishment is telling them they want. So they're moving away from that. So maybe if, let's say that the Yang, McCraven, or McCraven, let's say the ticket gets in, and you have a lot of non-traditional, non-loyalist Democrats and Republicans in Congress. Maybe they will be able to work with them. Maybe they will be able to get something done. Who knows? I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Like I said, I just wanted you to know what it was, and there are other concerns. because they don't actually have anybody up there right now officially, we don't have policies. We don't know what the policies are going to be. How are they going to, if it is Yang, we know a little bit about the economic policy. Universal basic income is going to be something, it's going to come back. He's going to talk about it. If he decides to do this and they do it and they get it together and they run. Universal basic income is going to be one of his talking points. Bet on it. $1,000 a month for every American. Sounds pretty good to me. Right? But I don't know. It's just, and that leads down a class warfare rabbit hole that I don't want to go down tonight. It's been a long week. So, but there it is. There's the Unity 2020 Dark Horse Duo presentation. I have misgivings about it. I think a lot of people will have misgivings about it. I want to say that this is a really good idea. It is a really good idea. I'm going to say it's a really good idea. I like the idea. I like the guys that they picked that he was talking about. But I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it can happen. Not because of, they're not strong enough. But I don't think it'll work because we are so entrenched in these divisive politics, these divisive urban, ultra progressive liberal politics. And it's just, and I'll be honest with you, the Republican Party is on the verge of coming to a very serious, harsh realization. They're going to have to change from the top down. They're going to have to get rid of their leadership. They're going to have to get rid of some of their old classic ideologies, and they're going to have to change the way they present the world to Republicans across the country. They are about to get a rude awakening. Now, here's the thing. Is it going to be the ultra left? Is it going to be the moderate left? Is it going to be this plan? This Unity 2020 thing? Is it going to, what's going to be the rude awakening for the Republicans, for the Republican Party? And that's a great question. But they're getting ready to get it. Regardless, they're getting ready to get a seriously rude awakening. And I think conservatives across this country are going to have to step back and rethink how they perceive the world as well. Because kind of like I said in the Short Files episode about the South, the country's moving forward. I don't like the direction that the country's going in, personally. But it's moving forward. And I'm not saying that we need to have these Confederate statues. Those statues should have never gone up to begin with. But at the same time, people are losing their jobs for the dumbest reasons. Because people are screaming racist. Or transphobe. Or bigot. The co-founder of Vox got canceled. Because he signed a freaking letter about free speech. And he got called out and canceled because a transgender person who worked at Vox wrote to the other co-founder of Vox and said that they felt threatened by him signing that letter because J.K. Rowling signed it. Are you fucking kidding me? And then somebody else, and this was the thing that shocked me this morning when I saw this. Somebody else, the man who wrote it is a black scholar. And because he wrote it, some white privileged bitch on the ultra left pointed out that he was mixed. He wasn't even fully black. And basically, in so many words, said that negated his authority to write such a letter about the First Amendment. What? I thought you were about diversity. And what the Harper letter has proven to show, or has proven and opened up everybody's eyes to, is that this cancel culture that the left has been denying, even though they've been actively participating in it, it's real. And it's gotten to a very dangerous level. And they are pulling out the stops. You're canceling a black person because he's not black enough. Are you kidding me? Because he said that we need to respect free speech and we need to make sure we guard the First Amendment and allow others to talk. Because you don't like what they say, you're going to cancel them. As I said before, that's Orwellian. And be frankly honest with you, as a white, middle-class, middle-aged man, I'm scared. I'm not scared because I'm a bigot, and I'm not scared because I'm a racist, and I'm not scared because I'm a misogynist. I'm scared because somebody will take something I said and flip it and ruin my life. Take it completely out of context, and before anybody understands the context, my life will be over. And it's a real possibility because, like I said earlier in the podcast, I don't have the cultural power to stop it, to overcome it. Unlike someone like a Jordan Peterson or a Joe Rogan. And most of the people who signed that letter signed it because of that, because there are a lot more people like me and my white friend who's just as in danger as I am. Even though he has a disability, it doesn't even matter anymore. Nothing matters anymore. And I'm not saying, oh, boo-hoo, look at me, I'm the white man. I'm just stating a fact. I'm scared. I'm a little nervous right now. And a lot of white, middle-class, middle-aged men out there are nervous. There's a lot of us that are nervous right now. Not because we have ever done anything wrong, because we're human beings. We have done things wrong, right? But we've done a lot of right things too. We've done a lot of things that are good. That does not matter anymore. And that's what's scary. And what that Harper's letter proved was that it's not just the white middle-class, middle-aged males anymore. It's anybody. They will come after you, and it does not matter who you are. They're going to come for you if you piss them off. Sorry it got dark there. Sorry it got deep. So I like the Unity 2020 thing. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it'll pan out. The optimist in me wants to say there are ways for this to happen, but the realist in me is the national media is going to destroy this. They're going to have a field day with this. If this gets any steam, they're going to have a field day with it. And this is just one of those moments where we're going to see the power of the people is a myth, maybe. Or maybe the power of the people will actually come through, and you'll see the general populace say, we've had enough, and actually put this in place. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see, won't we? It's not that long till November, but November's a long ways away, right? So, anyway, all right. Next time on the BetaFiles, we're going to talk about primetime TV. What has happened to primetime TV? Kind of like the album, we're going to talk about it in that vein, kind of an observational history of primetime TV. What has happened since the 70s and 80s when it was in its golden age? You had things like talk about shows that would not be on TV now. All in the Family, right? But you also had Mary Tyler Moore. And then you get into the 80s, you get Cheers, you get, and Jay and I talked a lot about this. And of course, you got MASH that kind of bridges those 2 decades. And of course, you get into the 90s and you get Seinfeld and Friends and A Different World. A Different World, right? The offshoot from The Cosby Show. Where Denise's character goes to an HBCU, and you see, for the first time that we know, that I know of. Well, it's the first time ever you have a entire sitcom built inside of an HBCU. I didn't know what an HBCU was until A Different World came on. And it was a great show. And then of course you had The Fresh Prince, right? And Will Smith is talking about things they're still talking about today. And the beauty of that show was just the way he was able to juxtapose between the Beverly Hills life and the Philadelphia life, the street life. It was just fantastic. What a great show. What a fantastically, wonderfully great show. But since really, and I think, and I'll talk about this more during the podcast, but I think the end of The Big Bang is the end of the last of the great sitcoms. I don't know if the last of the great sitcoms in primetime. Put it that way. Primetime doesn't mean much anymore because of the internet. And I'll talk about all that. What happened? So we'll talk about it. Primetime TV. Next time on the BetaFiles. And then we'll also, next week, we're going to talk about the picket fence. What happened to the picket fence? What is the picket fence? Why do we talk about the picket fence? And I may bring Jay in on that. I don't know. I'll have to ask him, see if he wants to talk about that with me or not. So, all right. Well, I hope you learned something about Unity 2020. I hope I didn't bore you with the talk of cancel culture. But so there you go. Don't forget our schedule has changed. Optic Poet on Monday. Tuesdays, the text messages from the living room. On Wednesdays, the BetaFiles podcast. Thursdays, Now See This Here, Now Then with Richard Cranium. And then Fridays, the second run of the BetaFiles for that week. That's Monday through Friday. Nothing on Saturday and Sunday. Also, check out shorter clips of our shows and our podcasts on YouTube. Be sure to check us out if you haven't heard the podcast yet and you've been watching this on YouTube. Check us out on Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, and Spotify, and at some point iHeart and Apple. Still waiting on those two, but we're on all the others. So we may not end up on iHeart and Apple. I don't know. I haven't heard hide nor hair from either one of them since I submitted the podcast. So we'll see. Check out our blog, www.thebetafiles.com, where you can find all of our content in one convenient place. Okay? All right, that's it. Make it a great day. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And always remember, if the sun comes up, there's opportunity, so take it. This has been the Beta Files.